Hi everyone and welcome back. I'm doing another cooking video. I'm doing one of my favorites, one of my staples, which is risotto. I actually have a podcast episode about risotto, just me talking about my philosophy on risotto and my measurements and my method and all of that. So if you prefer to listen to an episode as opposed to watch, you can go back to season 3. I think it's episode 6. I'll put the link in the show notes so that you can hear that if you prefer to listen to it kind of as you go out on the road without sitting in front of a video camera, or video screen. Anyway, so here we are in my kitchen again. I'm making risotto. It is one of my absolute favorite things to make. It is a lot less complicated than a lot of people might make you think it is. And I'm just going to take you through step by step. One of the key things is, and I mentioned this in the podcast, is doing a quick pantry audit. And what I mean by that is making sure that I have all the stuff that I need in order to make it. So risotto is a very forgiving type of meal in that, or maybe forgiving is not the right word. I think it's a very versatile meal. So just like pasta, you can flavor it any way you want. I'm making a basic one here. I'm going to have a little bit of lemon, a little bit of herbs, but apart from that, it's going to be fairly plain. You can zhuzh it up any way you want with whatever kind of additives you want. It's entirely up to you. But once you know the basics, then you can change things from there, change up the cheese that you use or change up any type of protein or flavorings or anything like that. You just need to know how to do the basics first. So that's what we're going to talk about. So doing the pantry audit is the same thing as kind of what I've done here, my mise en place, which I'm very in favor of doing, especially when it comes to making risotto. The reason is that once you start cooking it, you kind of have to keep an eye on it. It's not the kind of thing that you can just put on the stove and then you can kind of forget about it. You really do. You don't have to stir it constantly, but you do have to keep an eye on it, stir it regularly, frequently, and I'll talk a little bit about why that is in a moment. So that's why it's really important to have all your ingredients already prepped and ready to go before you start cooking. Now, what have I got here? So first, I'm just going to move things out of the way as I talk about them. I have a pot. This is my favorite pot. It's called, the brand is Scanpan, and it is from Denmark. I love this pot. I like that it's deep, but it's kind of narrow at the bottom. Any heavy bottom pot will work. You could use, like I have the Le Creuset, you can see back here, I got a couple of Le Creuset pots. I pretty much mostly use that for making sourdough bread now. I don't really use them for cooking that much anymore. I mostly use this, it's called a bistro pan. So a sauteuse, you want something that's got a little bit of high sides. You could use a frying pan, but if you use a frying pan or something that's like flat and wide, the liquid's going to evaporate a lot faster, so you may need more liquid than what I'm calling for in this recipe, my no recipe for risotto. So this is my favorite pan. Pick whatever kind of pan you want. So I've got that. The next thing is the rice, and I have 2 different rices here. They're similar, but not exactly the same. This is widely available. It's called arborio rice. It's an Italian rice. It's kind of short grain. Let's see if I can maybe zoom in on this a little bit, but it's a short grain rice, and it's quite starchy. And so risotto is kind of like a rice pudding or a rice porridge, but it's savory rather than sweet. And the starch that's in the rice comes out when it's cooked, and the stirring that we do is what brings that starch out. It's why we don't stir regular rice, because we don't want regular rice to be sticky or starchy. We want it to be light and fluffy. That's why we just put the rice in water, put a lid on, and let it just kind of do its thing. We're doing the opposite here. We're stirring this because we want to bring out all that starchiness. So this is arborio rice, available at any grocery store. There's another brand of rice, or maybe not brand isn't the right word. It's a style of rice. It's called carnaroli, which is very similar to our arborio. This is also an Italian rice. Either one of these two rices will work. So you have to use arborio or carnaroli rice. You cannot use regular old rice to make risotto. So that's very important. I'm going to talk a little bit about proportions in a moment, but for now, we'll just talk about what the basic ingredients are that you need. You're going to need some olive oil. Any old kind of olive oil will do. You're going to need some wine. I have some white wine here. You could also use white vermouth if you wanted, or you could use something like a white balsamic vinegar. Any type of like white acid will work really well. I am putting some lemon juice in as well, but for this, I think just a white or white wine vinegar would work as well if you don't want to actually use wine. The other thing that's important with this is that you use a wine that is suitable for drinking. There's no such thing as cooking wine. If you don't want to drink the wine, then you don't really want to cook with it either. So what I'm using today is this wine. And this is a Chardonnay from Prince Edward County. It's called Lighthall Chardonnay. It's called Béton, which is French for cement or concrete. And so it is unoaked, which means it's matured in a concrete vessel. So it does not impart any kind of oakiness or anything like that. So it's going to be very, very fresh. I'll have more tasting notes on this once I drink my wine while I'm eating my risotto. So that is the wine that I'm using. The other thing I've got, and it's actually on the stove right now, is chicken stock or chicken broth. You can use any kind of broth you want. Mushroom broth, beef broth, chicken broth, vegetable broth. You can use it out of a Tetra Pak. You can make your own. You can use a product like this, Better Than Bouillon. This is actually their vegetable base. So it's like a thick paste that you put with water, and that makes it into a broth. Any type of broth is totally fine, whatever you want. So that's what I'm using this. I'm using chicken broth. Now, I just want to mention about the broth is when you're making risotto, your broth needs to be warm. You can't put cold broth in because as you cook the risotto, as you add in increments, you're adding a little bit of liquid at a time. You want that broth to be hot because you don't want to cool down what's in your pot too much. So I'm going to show you what I have on the stove here. Simmering on the back burner, I have a pot. So this is my broth. And inside here, it's kind of hard to see. I'll tip it a little bit. I have a slice of lemon. I've got some little bits of herbs. I've got some onion bits and onion skin. I've got the stems of some mushrooms. Basically, anything that you would call an aromatic is in here. And that way, it infuses all those flavors into the stock. So that is on my back burner, keeping warm. Okay, so let's talk about herbs. I have a little bit of fresh basil here. I also have some thyme and rosemary chopped up fresh and some lemon zest in here. So this is a little sprig of thyme. Might be kind of hard to see here. But once I've taken the bits of thyme off, kind of just go like this and take them off. This goes in my pot. Okay, so rather than throwing those kinds of things away, you throw that into your pot of broth or stock because it adds a lot of flavor. What else do I have here? I have a little bit of lemon juice, maybe about 2 tablespoons. I kind of squeezed some of that. I have some chopped mushrooms. I use cremini mushrooms because I like the brown mushrooms better than white mushrooms. Again, optional. This brings a lot of flavor. So one of the things that is crucial in making risotto is that you have what we call aromatics. And in my case, the aromatics I'm using, I have finely diced onion and 2 cloves of garlic, and I've got my mushrooms. These are going to be my aromatics. That's going to bring a lot of flavor in. There are many different things you can use. You could use leeks. You could use shallots. You could use fennel. You could use celery, you could use carrots, any combination of those type of vegetables. We call those aromatics, and you can use aromatics when you're making your risotto, or you should use aromatics. So it's entirely up to you. If you don't like mushrooms, don't put them in. These are fresh. You could also use dried mushrooms. Make sure if you use dried mushrooms, you reconstitute them with some boiling water and then chop them up finely, but don't throw away that water. Throw that in your broth, okay? Because that's going to bring another level of flavor. All of this is building layers and layers and layers of flavor into what you're making. So those are my aromatics. And then I have some grated Parmesan cheese. I grated it myself. I like it nice and fine and powdery. It melts in a little bit better. So there's my Parmesan. And then I mentioned my wine, so I've got my wine over here. And then I also have an Italian sausage. So this is completely optional. You can throw in whatever kind of protein you want. You can serve it and then put the protein on top. Like I've made this before where I've done like say a lemon and herb risotto with a piece of salmon that I just lay on top of the risotto. Or you can mix it in. If you have leftover chicken, you can throw that in. Anything you like, you could throw other types of vegetables in. Peas are really nice in here. It just is entirely up to you. I just happen to have a sausage in the fridge, so I cooked it up, and I cooked up the crumble. So I took it out of the casing and I cooked it, and it's like crumbly, like you would see on a pizza or something like that. All right, so those are all my ingredients. The last thing I'm going to talk about before I start cooking is proportions. So the rice that I'm using, I have half a cup of rice here. You know me, I'm always talking about like weighing your ingredients and stuff. In this case, I'm doing everything by volume. I'm making it a little bit simpler, and all of these are approximations. You can increase or decrease a few things. But for me, it all starts with how much rice am I using? I find for a meal-sized portion of risotto, you need about half a cup of rice per person, per serving. If it's going to be a side dish or like an entree, like an appetizer, before the meal, then I would use maybe a quarter of a cup or a third of a cup of rice per serving. It's just, risotto doesn't really keep. You have to make it and serve it right away. You can't really hold on to it or serve it later or come back for seconds. It's kind of one of those things you just sort of serve up. There's a saying, and this speaks to timing a little bit. There's a saying that risotto waits for no one. And what that means is that when it's ready, it gets served and it gets eaten. It doesn't sit in a pot on the stove. It doesn't sit in the oven to stay warm. You make it, you serve it, you eat it. Because as time goes by, when it's sitting there, the rice continues to absorb all the liquid and it starts to get thick and gluey and less pleasant to eat. The consistency should be that of sort of a thick porridge. When you scoop it into the bowl, and I'll show you once this is all done, it needs to maybe run a little bit, but not run too much. And you tend to eat it from around the edge. So the middle stays warm and you eat around the edge of the risotto, or the pile of risotto. So we start with in my case, I'm starting with half a cup because I'm just cooking for myself. I'm not cooking for anybody else tonight. It's just for me. So I have half a cup of rice. I have equal amounts of my aromatics. So I have about half a cup of chopped mushrooms, about half a cup of chopped onions. I have about half a cup of grated parm. I have about half a cup of white wine. So see how it's like all about the same, half a cup, half a cup, half a cup, half a cup. The only thing that would be different is the amount of oil I use and the amount of herbs and things that I put in. Obviously, that's not going to be half a cup, but basically that's how you know what the proportions are. You start with whatever the proportion of rice is, and then you go from there. And the amount of rice depends on the number of servings that you're making. So I have just shy of half a cup here because I'm not super, super hungry. I don't want to make a huge amount of it. So the other thing is the timing. And I mentioned before about doing your mise en place and everything ready to go. It takes about 20 to 25 minutes maybe we'll say 25 minutes. If you're making a larger batch, like if you're making enough for 4 or 6 people, it's probably going to take a little bit longer than if you're making just one portion like I am tonight. So you need to kind of time things out. And by doing all your mise en place ahead of time, then when you're ready to serve, you're like, okay, it's now 25 minutes before I want my guests to be sitting down and eating dinner. Now I can start making my risotto. You can do everything else beforehand, and then you start 25 minutes ahead of when you want to serve it. So 25 minutes, I've got my stock on the stove. It's nice and keeping nice and warm. I am going to strain it as I pour it in. So you'll see me holding a strainer and pouring that in. But I think that's everything I've covered that we need to get started. So I'm going to reposition my camera and show you how to cook it on the stove.